Welcome to Revenge with Nora. I had been planning this dinner for 6 weeks. Not a party, not a big blowout, just a dinner. A real one, at the kind of restaurant where they bring bread to the table without you asking and the lighting is soft enough to make everyone look like they mean the things they say. I had made the reservation on a Tuesday morning sitting at my desk, still catching my breath from the news my director had just delivered. I wanted to celebrate the right way, surrounded by the people who are supposed to matter most. I booked a private dining room. I ordered flowers for the centerpiece. I even called my mother personally, not just texted, because I knew she checked her phone the way some people check the weather only when she already suspected something was coming. She picked up on the second ring, and when I told her I had been promoted to Senior Director of Marketing at 31 years old, the youngest in the company's history, she said, "Oh, that's nice. Sweetheart." Then she asked if I had talked to my brother lately. That should have told me everything. My name is Jessica Calloway. I am 31 years old. I have been the invisible daughter my entire life, the one who got good grades while my brother got applause. The one who paid her own college tuition while my parents co-signed his loans. The one who sent birthday cards that were never acknowledged while his birthdays became full weekends of family plans. I told myself for years that it didn't matter, that I was building something for myself regardless of whether they saw it. And I truly had. But some part of me, a stubborn, foolish, still hopeful part, believed that this moment, this specific achievement, the biggest of my career, would finally be the one they showed up for. It was not. The dinner was on a Friday. I arrived at the restaurant at 6:45, 15 minutes early, the way I always am for things I care about. The host walked me back to the private room, and I stood in the doorway for a moment taking it in. Round table, white linen, candles already burning. 8 place settings. 1 for me, 1 for my husband Daniel, and 6 for family, my parents, my brother and his girlfriend, my aunt and uncle who lived 40 minutes away and had confirmed just that morning. I sat down. Daniel poured water for both of us. We looked at the menus and talked about nothing, the comfortable kind of nothing that fills the space between two people who know how to wait together. 7 o'clock came. Then 7:15. I refreshed the family group chat, which had gone quiet since my mother's response that morning. A thumbs up emoji and a string of hearts that now felt like a joke. At 7:22, my phone buzzed. My brother. Running a little behind, big things happening on my end. We'll explain later. Don't wait on us. I set my phone face down on the table. At 7:38, my aunt texted. "So sorry, hun. Your parents needed a ride, and it's taking longer than expected. We'll catch up with you soon." At 8 o'clock, the server came to ask if we were ready to order. I looked at Daniel. He looked at me. We ordered. I found out the truth the next morning. The way I always found out about things involving my family, through someone who wasn't trying to hide it. My cousin sent me a text with 3 photos attached. No caption, just a question mark. I opened the images and there was my entire family, all 6 of them, seated around a long table at a restaurant across town. My mother had a glass of wine raised. My father was laughing at something off camera. My brother sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who had just been told the world owed him something, which was the expression he wore most days. His girlfriend was leaning into him, and my aunt was there, the same aunt who had told me she was stuck waiting on my parents, both of them grinning at my brother like he had just returned from the moon. The caption on my brother's Instagram story, which he had made public, read, "Big night. The vision is finally coming together. Family shows up when it counts. Family shows up when it counts." I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment. Daniel was still asleep. The apartment was quiet. I had spent 6 weeks planning a dinner that 8 people had agreed to attend, and every single one of them had walked into a different restaurant without sending me a single word of explanation until they were already seated, and the bread was already on the table. I made coffee. I sat by the window. I did not cry, which surprised me. What I felt instead was something colder and much more useful. A kind of absolute clarity, the sort that only comes when you have, finally, completely run out of the capacity to be surprised. My brother had been pitching a tech startup idea for 2 years. It had changed names 3 times and pivoted twice, and still had not produced a single dollar of revenue. But my parents spoke about it the way people speak about a moon landing, with a reverence that left no room for questions. Every family gathering for the past year had included at least one extended monologue from my father about how my brother was going to change the industry. I had sat through all of it. I had smiled. I had asked polite follow-up questions. I had watched my own promotions, my own milestones, my own life get mentioned briefly and then redirected back to him. I had learned to stop waiting for the applause. I just hadn't expected them to walk out of the theater entirely. I didn't reach out. Not that day, not the next. I went to work on Monday, sat through my meetings, answered my emails, and let my phone fill up with notifications I had no interest in reading. By Wednesday, my mother had called 4 times. My father had called twice, which was unusual enough to feel like weather changing before a storm. My brother had sent a single text that said, "Hey," with no follow-up, which was somehow worse than nothing. On Thursday morning, I finally listened to my mother's voicemail. Her voice had a quality I had never heard from her before, a thin, pressurized sound, like something was being held back by force. "Jessica, I know you're upset about Friday, and we do want to talk about that, but something else has come up and it's a bit urgent. Your brother's pitch meeting didn't go the way we hoped. The investors passed, and there are some financial obligations that have come due, and we just need to have a family conversation. Please call me back." I sat with the phone in my hand for a while after that. There it was. Not guilt, not accountability, not even a real apology about Friday, just a segue, a smooth pivot from the thing they owed me to the thing they needed from me, delivered in my mother's most reasonable voice. As though these were simply 2 items on the same agenda. I called her back that afternoon. I wanted to hear it in real time. I wanted to understand exactly how they planned to say the thing they were about to say. She answered immediately. "Jessica, thank goodness. Listen, before anything else, about Friday we should have handled that better. We got caught up in your brother's news, and it wasn't fair to you. I know that. I noticed. She said it wasn't fair without saying she was sorry. I noticed she said we got caught up without saying they had made a choice. I noticed all of it and I said nothing, just waited. Your brother had a difficult week," she continued. "The investors want to restructure the deal, which means he needs to bring in some additional funding quickly or the whole thing falls apart. He's put a lot into this, Jessica. Years of work. Your father and I have already contributed everything we can. We just thought, given your position, given how well you've done, maybe you'd consider a short-term loan, just to keep things moving while he finds other investors." I think I laughed. A short, quiet sound that wasn't really humor. "So, let me understand this correctly," I said. "Last Friday, while I was sitting alone at a restaurant I had reserved 6 weeks ago for a celebration that every single person in that room had confirmed they were coming to, you were all across town toasting my brother's pitch meeting. And now, 4 days later, you're calling to ask me to fund him." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, the reasonableness had thinned. "We said we were sorry about Friday. But this is separate. This is about family." I let the words sit between us for a moment. "Family," I said. "You used that word at every graduation of mine you left early. You used it every holiday I drove 2 hours for, and spent feeling like a guest in my own family. You used it every time I asked why his needs always came first, and you told me I was being too sensitive. And now you're using it to ask me to financially rescue a business venture that failed because my brother spent 2 years networking at expensive dinners instead of building an actual product." Jessica, her voice had an edge now. "I am not a bank," I said. "I am your daughter. And for once I am asking you to remember the difference." I hung up. My hands were completely steady. What happened next was the part I had not fully anticipated. It wasn't that my parents pushed back harder, or that my brother showed up at my door, or even that my relatives called one by one with increasingly creative framings of why I should reconsider. All of that happened. But the thing I hadn't expected was how transparent it made everything, how their urgency stripped away the last of the performance and left only the machinery underneath. My father called that evening. His approach was different from my mother's, more direct, less diplomatic. He had always believed that volume and certainty could substitute for logic. "Jessica," he said, "your brother is family. You have more than enough. This isn't a big ask. More than enough. as though my salary was a communal resource I had been selfishly hoarding. As though my years of working 60-hour weeks, of turning down social plans to hit deadlines, of building a career from an entry-level coordinator position to senior director without a single dollar of family support, as though all of that had simply resulted in a pool of money that now rightfully belonged to everyone who shared my last name. I have exactly enough, I told him. For my life. The one I built alone. His voice went cold. We supported you more than you remember. I actually had to pause at that. I thought about the college loans I had repaid myself. I thought about the apartment deposit I had covered at 23 by working a second job on weekends. I thought about every professional setback I had navigated without a phone call home because I had learned early that calling home with problems meant ending the conversation feeling worse than when it started. I would love to hear about that support sometime, I said. But not today. I have a meeting. I hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, my brother tried 3 different angles. The first was guilt. You're really going to let everything I've worked for collapse? The second was accusation. I always knew you resented me. The third, which came on a Tuesday afternoon by text, was the most interesting. He said, "Fine. I'll figure it out. But don't expect to be part of this family when things turn around for me." I read that text twice. Then I screenshotted it, not because I planned to use it, but because I wanted to have it, this precise and perfect documentation of how he understood family as a transaction, a membership that could be revoked when you stopped being useful. I had been sitting on something for 2 weeks by that point. On the day of my promotion, before the dinner, before any of it, I had updated my LinkedIn profile. I had written a short post. Nothing dramatic, just the facts. My new title, a sentence about the work that had led there, a line about building something you're proud of even when the road is quiet. I had drafted it and then not posted it because I had been planning to celebrate with family first. I had wanted the private moment before the public one. Now, I went back to it. I read it over. I changed one line near the end, very slightly. The original version said, "Grateful for everyone who believed in me along the way." I changed it to, "Grateful for the clarity that comes from building something entirely your own." Then I added one more line, a photo. My offer letter, the official one on company letterhead with my name and new title printed in clean black type. I posted it on a Friday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the dinner. By noon, 240 people had liked it. Former colleagues, current teammates, people I had worked with years ago who I barely remembered, all of them adding their congratulations in a comment thread that kept growing through the afternoon. My director shared it with a note about what an asset I was to the team. 3 people reached out about job opportunities, which I filed away for later. Old friends from college who had lost touch sent messages. And I knew, because I know my family, that every single one of them had seen it. We had enough mutual connections that the post was sitting in all of their feeds by midday. My brother's girlfriend followed me on LinkedIn. My aunt was connected to my mother, who was connected to everyone. My mother's text came at 2:17 in the afternoon. "Jessica, I think that post is a bit much. People are asking me about it. Can you take it down or edit it?" I read it and thought about all the times I had been asked to make myself smaller so that someone else's comfort could remain intact. I thought about how long I had actually done it, how many years I had arrived quietly, celebrated nothing, needed nothing, asked for nothing, so that the family portrait could stay undisturbed. I typed back, "I've worked for this for a long time. I'm not taking it down." She responded, "You're making it about something it doesn't need to be about." I set my phone on my desk and went back to work. What I had not anticipated, again, was the ripple. I had posted a professional update about a legitimate achievement, and yet somehow, the response from my family treated it as an act of aggression, which told me something important. They had been so accustomed to my silence that the simple presence of my name in public felt like an accusation. I hadn't said a single word about the dinner, about the loan request, about any of it. I had simply said, "Here is what I have built, and here is my name on it." And that alone had been enough to crack something. My cousin, the one who had sent me the photos, texted me privately. She said, "For what it's worth, I think it's incredible. And I heard Aunt Linda telling your mom she had no idea how accomplished you were." I just thought you should know. I thanked her. I meant it. The next few weeks had a particular quality, a kind of settling. The way things go quiet after a long storm has finally moved through. My brother, I learned through my cousin, had found a small bridge loan from one of his friends and had restructured the startup for the third time under a new name. Whether it would survive another 6 months was unclear, but it was no longer my problem to solve or my failure to absorb. My parents had stopped calling daily. The group chat, which I had muted sometime in the second week, had apparently been used to plan a family birthday dinner for my father that I had not been told about until after it happened. I noticed this without feeling much about it, which I thought was probably the healthiest response I had ever had to something like that. Thanksgiving that year, for the first time in my adult life, I did not drive 2 hours to sit at a table where I felt like a guest. I hosted instead. My apartment, my table, my rules. Daniel's sister came with her husband and their 2 kids. 3 of my closest friends from work came. My neighbor from down the hall, a woman in her 60s named Ruth who had brought me soup when I had a bad cold the previous January, came and brought a pie that was genuinely the best thing I ate all day. We put music on. We cooked together in the kitchen for 3 hours, and it was chaotic and warm, and nobody was performing for anyone. When we sat down, one of my friends gave a toast. She said, "To the people who make you feel like enough." Everyone raised their glasses. I thought about how simple that was, how it shouldn't be a remarkable thing to be surrounded by people who made you feel like you were enough. And yet, sitting at that table, I understood that I had spent most of my life in rooms where I felt like not quite enough, always slightly less than what was needed, always approximate. And I had left those rooms and built a different one. My mother left a voicemail that afternoon. I listened to it that evening after everyone had gone home and Daniel was washing dishes in the kitchen. The sound of water and glasses a comfortable background noise. "Jessica, we're having Thanksgiving at home this year. Just the family. It would be nice if you came. I know things have been complicated lately. I know we haven't handled everything the right way. I just want you to know the door is open. Call me back if you want." I sat with the voicemail for a long time. She hadn't said she was sorry. Not fully. Not in the way that meant she understood what the apology needed to cover. She hadn't said she finally saw what they had done, not just at the dinner, but in the years before it, every birthday that passed unannounced. Every achievement met with redirection. Every time I had been the responsible one and the invisible one simultaneously, and somehow these had been treated as the same thing. I didn't call back that night, but I didn't delete the voicemail either, which I realized meant something. It meant I wasn't finished yet, not with them, not entirely, only with the version of myself who would drive 2 hours to sit at a table and feel invisible and say nothing about it because keeping the peace felt more important than being seen. That version was gone. The door, as my mother had said, might still be open. But I was the one who would decide when and how and under what conditions I walked through it, and I would not be walking through it the same way I always had, quietly, apologetically, grateful for being allowed in. I put my phone down. I went and stood next to Daniel at the sink. He handed me a dish towel. We finished the dishes together, and outside the kitchen window the city was lit up the way it gets on Thanksgiving night. All those warm rectangles of light in all those buildings, all those tables full of whatever kind of story the people inside them were living. I had built this one. That was not a small thing. I was done pretending it was. The last thing I did that night, before I went to sleep, was go back to the LinkedIn post. It was still up. 289 likes now. I scrolled through the comments one more time. At the very bottom, posted just that afternoon, was a comment from a woman I had mentored 2 years ago, a 24-year-old coordinator who was now managing her first campaign. She had written, "You are the first person in my career who told me I didn't have to shrink myself to make room for everyone else. Thank you for that. And congratulations, you deserve every bit of this." I liked her comment. I closed the app. Some things don't need a dramatic ending. They just need to be finished.